The old Honda finally gave up just outside the reservation border. Steam poured from under the hood like a white flag of surrender. Maria sat there for a moment, hands still gripping the steering wheel, wondering if she should laugh or cry. She chose neither. There wasn't time for either anymore. In the back seat, her 2 kids were asleep. Little Rosa, only 6 years old, had her head resting against the window. Her son Diego, 8, was curled up with his backpack as a pillow. They'd been driving for 6 hours straight from Phoenix, and Maria hadn't told them yet that they had nowhere to go. 3 weeks ago, she'd had a job teaching middle school English. 2 weeks ago, the school district laid her off due to budget cuts. 1 week ago, her landlord handed her an eviction notice. She was 2 months behind on rent, and he was done being patient. Her ex-husband was useless, sending maybe $50 a month when he remembered, which wasn't often. Maria had one option left. Her grandmother used to live in this small Arizona town, right on the edge of Apache lands. Grandma Rosa, the one her daughter was named after, had passed away 5 years ago. But Maria remembered the town. It was tiny, dusty, and isolated. Maybe she could find something here. Maybe someone would remember her grandmother and offer help. She got out of the car and opened the hood. Black smoke mixed with the steam. The engine was dead, completely gone. Maria leaned against the car and looked at the empty road stretching in both directions. No other cars. No gas stations in sight. Just desert, mountains in the distance, and the afternoon sun beating down like it had a personal grudge. She grabbed her phone. "No signal, of course not, Mom." Diego's sleepy voice came from the back seat. "Are we there yet?" "Almost, baby," she lied smoothly. She'd gotten good at lying lately. Good at pretending everything would be okay. "The car needs to rest for a bit. Why don't you and Rosa stay here while I walk up ahead and find help?" She could see buildings in the distance, maybe half a mile away. She locked the car, checked twice that the windows were cracked enough for air but not enough for danger, and started walking. Her feet hurt. Her whole body hurt. She'd been running on coffee and stress for weeks. The first building she reached was a small diner, the kind that looked like it hadn't changed since the 70s. Faded blue paint, a flickering neon sign that said "Eat," and 3 pickup trucks parked outside. Through the window, she could see a handful of people inside. Maria almost kept walking. She looked terrible. Her jeans had a stain on them from when Diego spilled juice 2 days ago. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. She hadn't slept properly in weeks, and it showed in the dark circles under her eyes, but she was thirsty, tired, and desperate. Pride was a luxury she couldn't afford anymore. The bell above the door chimed when she walked in. Every head turned to look at her. In a town this small, strangers stood out. Maria kept her chin up and walked to the counter. A woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair looked her up and down. "Help you?" the woman asked. Not friendly, but not hostile either. "Just water, please," Maria said. "And do you know anyone with a tow truck? My car broke down about half a mile back." The woman filled a glass with ice water and slid it across the counter. "Jimmy does towing, but he's out of town till Thursday." That's 3 days from now. Maria's heart sank. 3 days. She had maybe $40 in her wallet and 2 kids sleeping in a dead car. "You Rosa Martinez's granddaughter?" An old man at the end of the counter asked suddenly. Maria turned, surprised. "Yes, you knew my grandma?" "Everyone knew Rosa," the man said, smiling. "Good woman. Made the best tortillas in 3 counties. Heard she passed. Sorry about that." "Thank you," Maria said softly. "What brings you out here?" another customer asked, a middle-aged woman with curious eyes. Maria hesitated. She could lie, make up some story about visiting family or passing through, but she was too tired for elaborate stories. "Looking for work," she said simply, "and a place to stay. I'm a teacher. Was a teacher. I can do bookkeeping, computer work, whatever needs doing." The diner went quiet. People exchanged glances. In small towns, everyone knew everyone's business, and new people were either interesting or suspicious. Maria couldn't tell which category she'd fallen into. "Timing's interesting," the gray-haired woman behind the counter said slowly. "Thomas was just in here yesterday complaining about paperwork." "Thomas Nashoba," the old man explained. "Does woodworking, traditional Apache crafts, furniture, that sort of thing. Beautiful work. But he can't manage the business side to save his life. Everything's still on paper and half of it's a mess. He's been looking for help for months," the middle-aged woman added, "but nobody wants the job. He's too particular. Doesn't like people touching his stuff or changing his systems. Where can I find him?" Maria asked, feeling a tiny spark of hope. The gray-haired woman pointed out the window. Workshop's about 2 miles that way. Big barn, can't miss it. But don't get your hopes up. Like Betty said, he's particular. Maria thanked them, drank her water, and started to leave. Then she remembered. Actually, I don't suppose anyone could give me a ride. My kids are still in the car, and it's pretty hot out there. The old man stood up, pulling keys from his pocket. Come on. I'll drive you to get your kids, then take you to Thomas's place. Rosa's granddaughter shouldn't be stranded on the side of the road. His name was Frank, and his truck was older than Maria. It rattled and wheezed, but ran. They picked up Diego and Rosa, who woke up confused and scared. Maria assured them everything was fine while Frank loaded their few suitcases into the truck bed. You running from something? Frank asked as they drove. Not unkindly. Just bad luck, Maria answered. Well, Thomas could use someone like you. His grandfather died 2 years back and left him the house and the business. Thomas knows the craft better than anyone, learned from the best, but he's been alone too long. Lost his wife a while back. Some people, they get stuck in grief, you know? Can't move forward, can't go back. Just stuck. They pulled up to a large property surrounded by pine trees. A beautiful house sat at the front, traditional in style but well-maintained. Behind it was a huge barn with the doors open. Even from the truck, Maria could see stacks of wood inside. A man stepped out of the barn, wiping his hands on his jeans. He was tall, probably late 30s, with long dark hair pulled back and a strong, weathered face. He looked at Frank's truck with mild curiosity, then his eyes landed on Maria and the kids. Got someone for you to meet? Frank called out cheerfully. This is Maria Martinez, Rosa's granddaughter. She's looking for work, and I told her you need help with your books. The man, Thomas, studied Maria for a long moment. His face was hard to read. Not unfriendly, but not welcoming either. Just careful, guarded. Can you use a computer? He asked finally. Yes, Maria said. I can do spreadsheets, email, social media, whatever you need. I don't do social media. Maybe you should, Maria said, then immediately regretted it. She was in no position to be giving business advice to someone she'd just met. But Thomas's expression shifted slightly. Maybe it was amusement. You have experience? I was a teacher for 6 years. Before that, I did admin work. I'm organized, I'm fast, and I need this job. She decided honesty was her only card to play. I've got 2 kids, no place to stay, and a dead car. If you hire me, I'll work harder than anyone you've ever met. Thomas looked at Diego and Rosa, who stood close to their mother. Then he looked back at Maria. Something in his expression softened, just a fraction. I've got a guest house out back, he said slowly. Hasn't been used in a while, but it's clean. You and your kids can stay there. In exchange, you handle my paperwork, update my systems, and deal with the galleries that keep calling. I'll pay you too, but not much. Business barely breaks even most months. Maria felt tears prick her eyes but held them back. When do I start? Tomorrow morning. 7 o'clock. He turned to walk back to the barn, then paused. Fair warning. I like my space. I don't do small talk, and I don't need friends. This is a work arrangement, nothing more. That's fine with me, Maria said. Frank drove them around back to show them the guest house. It was small, just 2 rooms and a bathroom, but it was clean and solid. After weeks of uncertainty and fear, it felt like a palace. That night, after she got the kids settled and asleep, Maria sat on the small porch and looked up at the stars. They were brighter here than in Phoenix. The air was cooler. Somewhere in the distance, she could hear Thomas still working in his barn. The sound of tools against wood carrying through the quiet night. She'd made it. Barely, but she'd made it. Now she just had to prove she deserved to stay. Maria woke up before dawn, a habit from years of teaching and single motherhood. The guest house was quiet except for the soft breathing of her children, still asleep in the small bedroom they now shared. She made instant coffee with the ancient coffee maker she'd found in the tiny kitchen and sat at the wobbly table, trying to prepare herself for her first real day of work. At exactly 7 o'clock, she knocked on the barn door. No answer. She knocked again, louder. Still nothing. Finally, she pushed the door open and stepped inside. The workshop took her breath away. Sunlight streamed through high windows, illuminating rows of carved wooden pieces. Tables, chairs, bowls, and sculptures filled every available space. The smell of cedar and pine was overwhelming in the best way. And the detail in the work, the craftsmanship, it was stunning. Each piece told a story through its carved patterns and smooth curves. Thomas was in the back corner, bent over a workbench, completely absorbed in whatever he was carving. He hadn't heard her come in. "Hello?" Maria called out. He jerked up, startled, and she saw the flash of annoyance cross his face. "Don't sneak up on people." I knocked, twice. He grunted and set down his carving tool. "Office is through that door. Computer's old, but it works. Files are in the cabinet." Good luck, that was it. No orientation, no explanation, no guidance. He turned back to his work, dismissing her completely. The office was a disaster. Papers were stacked everywhere, some dating back 3 years. Invoices were mixed with receipts, orders were scribbled on napkins and torn envelopes, and the computer looked like it was from the early 2000s. When she turned it on, it made a grinding sound that couldn't be healthy. Maria rolled up her sleeves and got to work. By lunchtime, she'd created a basic filing system and discovered that Thomas was owed nearly $15,000 from various galleries and customers. By dinner time, she'd drafted professional emails to each of them and created a simple spreadsheet tracking all pending orders. Thomas never came to check on her. Not once. At 6 o'clock, she walked back to the guest house where Diego and Rosa were playing outside. They'd explored the property all day, and for the first time in months they seemed happy. That alone made everything worth it. The pattern continued for 2 weeks. Thomas left notes for her, slipped under the office door at night. Need quote for table set. Gallery in Scottsdale called, return message. Update prices, old ones too low. He never spoke to her directly unless absolutely necessary, and even then he kept it brief. Maria didn't mind. She was too busy fixing the chaos he'd created. The more she dug into his business, the more frustrated she became. He was selling museum-quality work for prices that barely covered materials. He had no online presence. He turned down custom orders because he didn't have time to respond to emails. It was like he was actively trying to fail. One evening after the kids were asleep, Maria found herself too restless to sit still. She walked toward the main house and saw lights on inside. Through the window, she could see Thomas sitting alone at his kitchen table eating dinner. The image struck her as incredibly lonely. She knocked on his door. He answered, looking surprised and slightly suspicious. "We need to talk about your business," Maria said. He stepped aside to let her in. The house was beautiful inside, filled with his handmade furniture, but it felt empty. Too quiet, too neat, like a museum instead of a home. "What about it?" he asked. "You're undercharging for everything. That table you just finished? You sold it for $800. It should be $3,000 minimum. And you need a website. People can't buy what they can't find." "I don't need a website." "Yes, you do. You're losing money, Thomas. Actually losing it. You're paying more in materials and time than you're making back." He stared at her for a long moment. "My grandfather sold pieces for what people could afford. That's the traditional way. Your grandfather probably wasn't supporting himself entirely on his craft. I respect tradition, but you need to make a living. Let me help you. Let me set up proper pricing, create a website, reach out to better galleries." "Why do you care?" he asked, and there was genuine curiosity in his voice. "Because I need this job," Maria said honestly. "If your business fails, I'm back to having nothing. And because your work is too beautiful to be hidden away in a barn." Something shifted in his expression. He nodded slowly. "Okay, do what you think is best. But nothing too flashy. I'm not becoming some social media personality. Deal." She turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. "Stay for coffee, if you want." It was awkward at first. They sat at his table drinking coffee, neither quite sure what to talk about. Thomas wasn't good at small talk, and Maria was out of practice with adult conversation that didn't involve her kids or lesson plans. "Your children," he said finally. "They're adjusting well." "They are. This place is good for them. Open space, fresh air, better than our apartment in Phoenix." "What happened?" "If you don't mind me asking," Maria told him. "The layoff, the eviction, her useless ex-husband who'd walked away when Diego was a baby and showed up occasionally to make promises he never kept." She told him about the shame of standing in line at food banks, of lying to her kids about why they were eating cereal for dinner again. Thomas listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. "My wife died 5 years ago," he said. "Cancer, fast and brutal. We'd been trying to have kids. Never happened. And then she was gone, and suddenly this big house felt like a tomb. I threw myself into work because it was the only thing that made sense anymore. Wood doesn't leave. It doesn't get sick. It doesn't break your heart. I'm sorry, Maria said softly. People keep telling me to move on, to date, to remarry, like you can just replace someone. He laughed bitterly. But the truth is I don't want to replace her. I just don't want to be alone all the time. Does that make sense? Perfect sense. They talked until midnight. About loss, about loneliness, about the weight of single responsibility. When Maria finally walked back to the guest house, something had shifted between them. They weren't quite friends yet, but they weren't strangers anymore either. A week later, Maria launched Thomas's website. Simple, elegant, with professional photos of his work that she'd taken herself. Within 3 days, he had 5 custom orders. Within a week, a gallery in Santa Fe wanted to feature him in a show. Thomas stared at the computer screen, scrolling through messages. This is too much. This is what your work deserves, Maria corrected. That night, he knocked on her door. The kids were asleep, and Maria was doing Diego's laundry by hand in the kitchen sink because the guest house didn't have a washing machine. I have a proposal, Thomas said without preamble. A different arrangement. Maria dried her hands and turned to face him, curious and slightly nervous. You're good at the business side. Better than good. And having people around, having your kids around, it's been nice. The house feels less empty. So here's what I'm thinking. You move into the main house. Plenty of space. You get your own room, kids share the other bedroom. You handle all the business and I'll pay you a proper salary now that money's actually coming in. Thomas, I'm not finished, he interrupted. There's more. I'm tired of eating alone, tired of spending every evening in that house by myself. And you're tired of struggling, so maybe we help each other. You need stability and income. I need company. We share the space, share meals, and figure out the rest as we go. What exactly is the rest? Maria asked carefully. He seemed to struggle with the words. I don't know. Companionship. Someone to talk to at the end of the day. Someone who understands that life isn't perfect, that we're both just trying to survive and maybe find some comfort along the way. No expectations beyond that. Just 2 people who don't want to be alone anymore. Maria studied his face. He was serious, and more than that, he was vulnerable. This wasn't easy for him to ask. What about your family? Your community? What will people think? My mother will have opinions, he admitted. She always does. And people will talk. They always do. But this is my house, my life, and I'm tired of living it for other people's approval. Maria thought about her kids, about the stability this would give them. She thought about Thomas, this quiet man who'd shown her more kindness than anyone in months. She thought about how tired she was of fighting every battle alone. Okay, she said, but we set boundaries. Clear ones. This is a practical arrangement. We're not pretending to be something we're not. Agreed. And if it doesn't work, if either of us wants out, we talk about it like adults. Agreed. They shook hands on it, formal and awkward. But as Maria lay in bed that night staring at the ceiling, she couldn't help wondering what she'd just agreed to. She barely knew this man, but then again, she barely knew what tomorrow would bring anymore. At least this was a bet on something that felt solid, even if she couldn't quite name what it was. The next morning, they started moving her things into the main house. Diego and Rosa were thrilled, running from room to room, claiming spaces and exploring. Thomas watched them with something like wonder, as if he'd forgotten what it was like to have life and noise in these walls. That evening, they sat down to their first family dinner. Thomas had cooked surprisingly well, and the meal was simple but good. As they ate, Rosa chattered about a bird she'd seen, and Diego asked Thomas if he'd be Living under the same roof was stranger than Maria had expected. Not bad strange, just different. Thomas kept to himself most of the time, disappearing into his workshop before sunrise and staying there until dinner. But he was present at meals, sitting with them at the big wooden table he'd made years ago, listening to the kids talk about their day. Maria enrolled Diego and Rosa in the local school. It was tiny, just one building with combination classes, but the teachers were kind and the kids were curious about the newcomers. For the first week, Maria walked them to school and picked them up, nervous about how they'd adjust. But small-town kids were different from city kids. By the second week, Rosa had 3 best friends, and Diego had joined some kind of informal nature club that spent recess looking for interesting rocks. With the kids settled, Maria threw herself into transforming Thomas's business. She created social media accounts despite his grumbling, posting beautiful photos of his work in progress. She researched art markets and gallery connections. She raised his prices across the board, which caused their first real argument. "No one will pay these amounts," Thomas insisted, staring at her new price list. "They already are," Maria countered, showing him the deposits in his account. "That table you thought would sell for $800? I listed it for $3,000. Someone bought it in 6 hours." He looked stunned. $3,000. For a table. For your table. There's a difference. You're not selling furniture, Thomas. You're selling art. The sooner you accept that, the better. He shook his head but didn't argue further, and when the checks started coming in regular and substantial, he stopped questioning her methods entirely. The first month passed in a careful dance of boundaries. Maria had her bedroom on one side of the house. Thomas had his on the other. They shared the kitchen, the living room, and meals, but maintained careful distance otherwise. He never entered her space without knocking. She never disturbed him in his workshop unless it was business-related. It was polite, civil, and incredibly lonely. Maria noticed things about Thomas. How he always made extra coffee and left it in the pot for her. How he fixed the squeaky step outside her bedroom without being asked. How he left little carved animals on the kitchen counter for the kids to find. Small gifts that made them squeal with delight. Thomas noticed things about Maria, too. How she hummed while she worked. How she always made sure there were fresh flowers on the table, picked from the wild ones growing on the property. How she'd stand at the window sometimes, staring out at nothing, and he could see the weight of everything she carried in the set of her shoulders. The turning point came on a Friday evening. Maria was cooking dinner, something she'd taken over because Thomas's repertoire consisted of exactly 3 meals. She'd made chile verde, and the smell filled the entire house. Thomas came in from the workshop covered in sawdust, and without thinking, she brushed some off his shoulder. He froze. She froze. The casual touch had been automatic, and now it hung in the air between them, meaning more than it should. "Sorry," Maria said quickly, pulling her hand back. "It's fine," Thomas said, but his voice was rough. "I should shower before dinner anyway." When he came back down 20 minutes later, his hair was still damp and he'd changed into clean clothes. They ate dinner with the kids, the usual comfortable chaos, but underneath it was a new tension neither acknowledged. After Diego and Rosa went to bed, Maria cleaned up the kitchen while Thomas sat at the table, supposedly looking at order forms but mostly just watching her move around his kitchen like she belonged there. "We should talk about the Santa Fe Gallery show," Maria said, breaking the silence. "It's in 3 weeks. They want 12 pieces. I've got 8 ready. I can finish the others in time. You'll need to attend the opening, meet the buyers, network with other gallery owners. It's important," Thomas grimaced. "I hate those things. All that small talk and fake interest. It's part of the business now. Your business is growing, Thomas. You can't hide in your workshop forever." "I'm not hiding." "Yes, you are." He met her eyes, and something in his expression was raw. "Maybe I am. Maybe I've been hiding for 5 years, and maybe I'm not ready to stop." Maria sat down across from him. "What are you afraid of?" "That if I stop hiding, if I let myself feel things again, I'll fall apart. That everything I've carefully built to protect myself will just crumble." The honesty in his words took her breath away. "I understand that," she said softly. "I really do. I've been hiding too. From the shame of failing. From the fear that I'm not enough for my kids, from the reality that I might never have the life I thought I'd have. But Thomas, we can't live like ghosts forever." "Is that what we're doing? Living like ghosts?" "A little bit. We share this space, but we're so careful not to really share anything that matters. We're both so scared of getting hurt again that we're not really living at all." Thomas was quiet for a long time. "I don't know how to do this differently." "Neither do I, but maybe we could try." "Small steps, like what?" Maria thought about it. "Like you tell me about your wife. Not just that she died, but who she was. What you loved about her. And I tell you about the dreams I had before everything fell apart. Real things. Honest things." Thomas leaned back in his chair, and for a moment she thought he'd refuse. But then he started talking. Her name had been Elena. She was a nurse, practical and fierce and funny. She'd grown up on the reservation but left for college. Came back with big plans to improve healthcare for the community. She'd loved hiking, terrible reality TV shows, and Thomas's cooking, even though he insisted he was terrible at it. She'd wanted kids desperately, and every negative pregnancy test had broken her heart a little more. And then came the cancer diagnosis, stage 4, already spread everywhere. 6 months from diagnosis to death, and Thomas had watched her fade like a sunset, beautiful and terrible and unstoppable. I was angry at first, Thomas admitted. At God, at fate, at everything. We'd done everything right. We were good people, and it didn't matter at all. Then I was just numb. That was worse than the anger, feeling nothing at all. When did the numbness stop? Maria asked. The day your car broke down in front of my property, he said, meeting her eyes. First time in years I felt something other than emptiness. I saw you trying so hard to hold it together for your kids, and I just thought, that's someone who hasn't given up. That's someone still fighting, and it made me wonder when I'd stopped fighting. Maria felt tears prick her eyes. You gave me a lifeline when I was drowning. You know that, right? If you'd turned me away that day, I don't know what would have happened to us. I couldn't turn you away. Something about you just felt right. Like maybe we were supposed to find each other exactly when we did. They talked until past midnight. Maria told him about her ex-husband, about the slow death of that marriage under the weight of money problems and different dreams. She told him about the shame of being a teacher who couldn't provide for her own children, about lying awake at night doing mental math trying to figure out how to stretch $20 into 3 days of meals. Thomas listened the way he did everything else, completely and without judgment. And when she finally ran out of words, exhausted by her own honesty, he reached across the table and took her hand. You're stronger than you think, he said simply. So are you. Neither of them moved to let go. They sat there, hands clasped across the table. Two broken people holding onto each other in the quiet dark of a house that was finally starting to feel like a home. After that night, things shifted. Thomas started having coffee with Maria in the mornings before heading to the workshop. They'd talk about the day ahead, about orders and deadlines, but also about smaller things, how Rosa had learned to whistle, how Diego was reading books 3 grades above his level, how the wild turkeys kept trying to steal from the bird feeder. Thomas taught Diego to carve, simple things at first, just practicing cuts on scrap wood, but the boy had patience and steady hands, and Thomas found himself looking forward to their afternoon sessions. Rosa preferred to paint, so Thomas brought home paints and paper, and let her create wild, chaotic art that she taped up all over the house. Maria started touching him more. Nothing inappropriate, just casual touches that spoke of growing comfort. A hand on his arm when she wanted his attention, brushing past him in the narrow hallway, fixing his collar before they left for a business meeting. Each touch chipped away at the careful walls they'd both built. The night before the Santa Fe Gallery show, Thomas was working late trying to finish the last piece. Maria brought him dinner in the workshop, something she rarely did because it was his private space. You need to eat, she insisted, setting the plate down on his workbench. Almost done, he muttered, not looking up from the intricate carving he was working on. Maria watched him work. His hands moved with absolute confidence, coaxing beauty from raw wood like it was the easiest thing in the world. She'd seen him work before, but never this close, never with this much attention. How do you know exactly where to cut? She asked. Thomas paused and looked at the piece in his hands. The wood tells you. You just have to listen. Every piece has a shape already inside it. My job is just to reveal what's already there. I wish life worked that way, that we could just carve away the excess and reveal our true shape. The Santa Fe Gallery show was a success beyond anything Maria had imagined. Thomas stood awkwardly in the corner of the pristine white gallery space, watching wealthy collectors circle his work like sharks. He wore a button-down shirt she'd bought him, and he kept pulling at the collar like it was strangling him. Stop fidgeting, Maria whispered, appearing at his elbow with a glass of wine for him. I hate this, he muttered. They're talking about the wood grain like it's some kind of philosophical statement. It's just oak. Good oak, but still. It's not just oak and you know it. Smile. The woman in the red dress wants to buy 3 pieces. By the end of the night, Thomas had sold 9 of his 12 pieces and taken custom orders for 5 more. The gallery owner was thrilled and immediately wanted to schedule another show for spring. Thomas's face was tight with overwhelm as they drove back to the hotel. You okay? Maria asked. Too many people. Too much noise. Too much everything. Their hotel had booked them separate rooms, maintaining the careful boundary they'd established. But that night, around 2 a.m, Maria heard a knock on her door. She opened it to find Thomas standing there in his t-shirt and jeans, looking lost. Can't sleep, he said simply. Maria stepped aside to let him in. They sat on her hotel bed, backs against the headboard, not touching but close enough to feel each other's warmth. Neither spoke for a long time. Elena loved art shows, Thomas finally said. She'd drag me to every gallery opening in a 100-mile radius. I hated them then too, but she was so happy, so excited. I'd have gone anywhere if it meant seeing her smile like that. She sounds wonderful. She was, and I think she'd be glad I'm not stuck anymore, that I'm living again, even if it's messy and complicated. He turned to look at Maria. Thank you for pushing me, for believing in the work when I didn't. You're welcome. They fell asleep like that, sitting up in bed, shoulders touching, both too exhausted to overthink it. When Maria woke just before dawn, she was curled against Thomas's side and his arm was around her. She stayed very still, not wanting to break the moment. His breathing was deep and even, peaceful in a way she'd never seen him. They drove home the next day and something between them had softened. The walls were still there, but full of cracks now, letting light through. Then winter arrived properly, and with it came snow. The first storm hit on a Thursday in late November. Maria picked up the kids from school early as the sky darkened ominously. By dinnertime, snow was falling in thick, heavy sheets. By bedtime, they'd lost power. Thomas had been in the workshop when the power went out. Maria bundled the kids in blankets and waited, watching through the window. When he finally appeared, he was covered in snow and carrying an armful of firewood. "Wood stove in the living room still works," he said, shaking snow from his hair. "We'll need to stay warm tonight." Temperatures dropping fast, they built up the fire until it was roaring. Thomas brought down every blanket and sleeping bag in the house. "You should all sleep down here tonight," he said. "Bedrooms will get too cold." So they made a camp in the living room. Diego and Rosa thought it was a grand adventure, roasting marshmallows in the fireplace and telling ghost stories by flashlight. Thomas sat with them, actually smiling as Rosa acted out a story about a haunted barn with wild, dramatic gestures. When the kids finally fell asleep, wrapped in sleeping bags near the fire, Maria and Thomas sat together on the couch, sharing a blanket. The house creaked under the weight of snow and wind. The fire cast dancing shadows on the walls. "How long do you think the power will be out?" Maria asked quietly. "Could be days. Storm's supposed to last through the weekend. Phone lines are down too. We're on our own." There was something about being cut off from the world that made everything feel different, more intimate. Like they'd stepped outside of normal time into a space where the usual rules didn't apply. "I should tell you something," Thomas said, staring into the fire. "My mother's been calling. She wants to meet you." "That's good, isn't it? She wants to meet you because she's heard rumors about us living together. She's not happy about it." Maria's stomach tightened. "Because I'm not Apache? That's part of it. But mostly because she doesn't understand what we're doing. She thinks I'm being disrespectful to Elena's memory, that I'm not honoring our traditions by bringing a woman into my house without making proper commitments." "What did you tell her?" "That it's my life and my house. But honestly, Maria, I don't know what to tell her because I don't know what this is anymore." He turned to face her, and in the firelight his face was all shadows and angles. "What are we doing?" Maria's heart raced. "I don't know. Surviving?
Helping each other?"
It started as something practical, but it doesn't feel practical anymore." "No," Thomas agreed. "It doesn't. Are you sorry?" Maria asked, needing to know. "That you offered me this arrangement?" "Not for a single second." His hand found hers under the blanket. "Are you?" "No, even though it terrifies me. I came here with nothing, ready to take anything offered just to survive. But this has become so much more than survival, Thomas. My kids love it here. I love it here. And you've become so important to us, to me. You're important to me too. More than I planned on. More than I'm ready for, honestly." They sat in the quiet, hands clasped, the weight of their admission settling around them like the snow outside. Maria knew they were at a crossroads. They could keep pretending this was just a practical arrangement, keep maintaining careful distance. Or they could be honest about what was growing between them. "I'm scared," Maria admitted, "of needing someone again, of building something that could fall apart and leave me broken. I'm scared too, of forgetting Elena by moving on, of betraying her memory by being happy again." "Do you think she'd want you to be alone forever?" Thomas smiled sadly. "No. She'd probably be furious at me for wasting the last 5 years. She believed in living fully, in taking chances. I've been doing the opposite." The fire popped and hissed. Upstairs, something creaked under the weight of accumulated snow. The wind howled around the house like a living thing. "Maybe we could try," Thomas said quietly. "Not jumping into anything, but being honest about what we feel. Seeing where it goes together." "Together," Maria repeated. The word felt heavy with promise. Thomas lifted their joined hands and kissed her knuckles gently. It was the smallest gesture, barely anything, but it felt monumental. Years of loneliness, fear, and grief hung between them, and this one simple touch was pushing through it all. "Stay," Thomas whispered. "Not just in the house, but here with me. The nights are so cold, Maria, and I'm tired of being cold." Maria understood what he was asking. Not for anything physical, not yet. Just for companionship. For warmth. For the simple comfort of not facing the dark alone. She shifted closer, curling against his side. Thomas wrapped his arm around her, and she felt the tension drain from his body. They sat like that for hours, watching the fire burn down, listening to the storm rage outside and the quiet breathing of her children nearby. The power stayed out for 3 days, just as Thomas predicted. They lived by the rhythm of the fire, feeding it constantly, cooking simple meals on the wood stove, melting snow for washing water. Diego and Rosa adapted with the easy resilience of children, turning the inconvenience into adventure. But for Maria and Thomas, those 3 days were transformative. Stripped of all distractions, with nowhere to hide and nothing to do but be present with each other, they talked. Really talked. About childhood memories and failed dreams and secret hopes. About Elena and Maria's ex-husband and all the ways grief could paralyze you if you let it. Thomas told her about his grandfather, about learning to carve as a boy, about the stories woven into Apache traditions that made every piece of wood sacred. Maria told him about teaching, about the moment she'd discovered she was pregnant with Diego and terrified, about reading to her kids every night no matter how tired she was because books had saved her as a child. They cooked together, their movements in the kitchen becoming a dance of increasing familiarity. They played card games with the kids and told stories and sang songs that echoed through the cold house. And every night they slept side by side on the couch wrapped in blankets, finding warmth in each other. On the 3rd morning, Maria woke first. Thomas was still asleep, his face relaxed and peaceful. His arm was around her waist, holding her close even in sleep. Dawn light filtered through the windows, turning the snow-covered landscape outside into something magical. She traced the line of his jaw lightly, barely touching. His eyes opened, immediately finding hers. "Hi," she whispered. "Hi." They stared at each other, and Maria saw the same questions in his eyes that she felt in her heart. "What happens now? Where do we go from here? Are we brave enough to really try this?" "I don't want to go back to how things were before," Maria said softly. "The careful distance. The pretending. Neither do I. But I'm scared of what everyone will think. Your mother. The community. People will judge us. Let them judge," Thomas said, and there was steel in his voice. "I spent 5 years living for ghosts and other people's expectations. I'm done with that. If this is wrong, if we're making a mistake, then it's our mistake to make." The power came back on that afternoon with a surge and hum of electricity. The house flooded with light and heat from the vents. Diego and Rosa cheered. December arrived cold and clear. Maria and Thomas settled into a new rhythm that was easier in some ways and harder in others. They shared a bed most nights, holding each other in the dark, finding comfort in simple proximity. But they didn't define it, didn't put words to what they were doing or what it meant. They existed in a strange in-between space that felt safe but also fragile, like something that might shatter if examined too closely. The kids noticed the shift but didn't question it. Diego mentioned once that he'd seen Thomas leaving Maria's room early one morning, and Maria had frozen, unsure how to explain. But Diego had just shrugged and said, "That's cool. Does this mean Thomas is like our stepdad now?" The question hung in the air, unanswered because Maria didn't know the answer herself. Thomas taught Diego more advanced carving techniques. The boy had real talent, steady hands, and an eye for detail. They spent hours together in the workshop, the sound of their tools creating a steady rhythm. Thomas found himself looking forward to these sessions, to passing on skills his grandfather had taught him. It felt like honoring tradition while building something new. Rosa was different, all wild energy and creativity. She painted portraits of everyone, her style chaotic but somehow capturing something true. Thomas framed her paintings and hung them in his office, which made her glow with pride. She started calling him T.O. Thomas, Uncle Thomas, without anyone telling her to. The first time she said it, Thomas's eyes had gotten wet and he'd had to turn away. Maria's transformation of the business continued. Orders poured in faster than Thomas could fill them. She hired a college student from the reservation to help with shipping and basic administrative tasks. She negotiated with galleries in Phoenix, Albuquerque, and even Los Angeles. Thomas's work was featured in a magazine about Native American arts. Money, for the first time in either of their lives, wasn't a constant source of stress, but success brought visibility, and visibility brought judgment. Thomas's mother finally came to visit on a cold Saturday in mid-December. Her name was Nina, and she arrived unannounced, pulling up in her old truck with 3 of Thomas's aunts in tow. Maria was in the kitchen making breakfast when she heard the vehicles. Through the window, she saw 4 older Apache women getting out, their faces stern and assessing. "Thomas," Maria called out, trying to keep the panic from her voice. "I think your family's here." Thomas appeared from the workshop, saw the gathering, and swore quietly. "I didn't know they were coming today. Should I hide? Take the kids somewhere?" "No," his jaw set firm. "This is your home. You don't hide." But when Nina walked into the house without knocking, her sharp eyes taking in every detail, Maria felt like an intruder. The woman was maybe 60, with gray-streaked hair in a long braid and a face that had weathered decades of hard desert life. She looked at Maria with neither warmth nor hostility, just careful assessment. "So," Nina said in Apache, then switched to English when she saw Maria's confusion. "You're the woman living in my son's house?" "Mom," Thomas said, warning in his voice. "This is Maria, my mother, Nina. Mrs. Neshoba," Maria said, offering her hand. "It's nice to finally meet you." Nina looked at the offered hand for a long moment before taking it briefly. Her grip was firm, her palm calloused from years of work. "My son tells me you're helping with the business." "Yes, I manage the office and handle all the client communications." "And you live here? With your children?" "In this house, I do. Thomas offered us the guest house when we first arrived, but we moved into the main house a few months ago. There's plenty of space." One of the aunts muttered something in Apache. Nina silenced her with a look, then turned back to Maria. "What are your intentions with my son?" "Mom," Thomas said firmly. "That's enough." "It's okay," Maria said, though her heart was racing. "I understand you're concerned. Thomas has been incredibly kind to me and my children when we had nowhere else to go. I hope I've been helpful to him in return, both with the business and with making this house feel less empty." "That's not what I asked." Maria met Nina's eyes directly. "I care about your son very much, but we're taking things slow. We're both healing from past hurts. We're both trying to figure out what we want and what's right for our family." "Your family," Nina repeated. "You mean your children?" "I mean all of us. Me, my kids, and Thomas. We've become a family even if it doesn't look traditional." Nina studied her for a long moment. "My son's wife was a good woman, Apache, connected to her community and her traditions. I had hoped when he finally moved on, it would be with someone who understood our ways." The words stung, but Maria kept her voice steady. "I respect that. I'm not trying to replace anyone or erase anything. I know I'm an outsider, but I'm learning, and I'm here because Thomas wants me here." Thomas stepped forward, putting himself physically between his mother and Maria. "Mom, I love you, but this is my house and my life. Maria and her children are staying. They're part of my family now. If you can't accept that, then you can leave." The room went silent. Even the aunts who'd been murmuring to each other stopped. Nina's face was unreadable. Then Diego appeared from upstairs, half asleep and wearing pajamas, asking what the noise was about. He saw the crowd of people and froze. Then he saw Thomas and walked directly to him, leaning against his side without hesitation. Thomas's arm came around the boy's shoulders automatically. "Sorry," Diego mumbled. "Didn't know we had guests." Nina watched this interaction with sharp eyes. "You're Maria's son?" "Yes, ma'am. I'm Diego, that's my sister Rosa upstairs. And you like it here? Living on the reservation?" Diego nodded enthusiastically. "It's the best place we've ever lived. Thomas is teaching me to carve. I made a bowl last week. It's not very good yet, but Thomas says I'm getting better, and the school's nice. Everyone's really friendly." Something in Nina's expression softened fractionally. She looked from Diego to Thomas to Maria. "We'll have coffee," she announced. "And talk. Properly." The next 2 hours were some of the most uncomfortable of Maria's life. They sat around the big kitchen table while Nina and the aunts asked questions. Some were about the business. Some were about Maria's background. Some were thinly veiled tests to see if Maria knew anything about Apache culture and traditions. Maria answered honestly, admitting what she didn't know, showing respect for what she was learning. She talked about her grandmother, about growing up on the edges of different communities, about understanding what it meant to be an outsider. She didn't pretend to be something she wasn't. When Rosa finally woke up and came downstairs, she climbed directly into Thomas's lap without shyness, showing him a drawing she'd made the night before. "Look, I made you with wood," she said proudly, showing a chaotic but somehow recognizable picture of Thomas at his workbench. Nina watched this too, her face carefully neutral, but Maria saw something flicker in her eyes, understanding maybe, or at least the beginning of it. Before they left, Nina pulled Thomas aside. Maria couldn't hear what was said, but she saw Thomas's shoulders relax slightly. When he came back after walking them to their trucks, he looked exhausted but relieved. "That went better than I expected," he said. "Really? Because I thought she was going to throw me out." "She was testing you. That's what she does. And you passed. She told me you're stronger than you look, and that the children clearly love it here. She's still not thrilled, but she'll come around." "And if she doesn't?" Thomas pulled Maria close, resting his forehead against hers. "Then she doesn't. I meant what I said. This is my life, and you're in it. That's not changing." But the visit had shaken something loose. Over the next week, people from the reservation started showing up at the workshop. Some came to place orders, but many came just to look, to assess. The word had spread. Thomas Neshoba, who'd been alone for 5 years, had a woman living with him. A Mexican woman with 2 kids. People had opinions, most were polite if reserved. Some were openly disapproving. A few were genuinely warm, remembering Maria's grandmother and welcoming her back to the area. Maria tried not to take the judgment personally, but it wore on her. Her ex-husband chose that moment to resurface. He called demanding to see the kids, threatening to challenge custody. "You're living with some man I don't know," he said. "Dragging my kids to some reservation in the middle of nowhere. That's not appropriate." Maria wanted to scream at him that he hadn't cared about appropriate when he'd abandoned them, when he'd skipped child support payments, when he'd shown up drunk to Diego's 6th birthday. But she kept her voice calm because she'd learned the hard way that engaging only made things worse. "The children are happy, healthy, and thriving," she said. "You're welcome to visit them anytime. But if you try to challenge custody, I'll document every missed payment, every broken promise, and every time you chose yourself over them." He blustered and threatened, but ultimately backed down. He always did. Still, the call left Maria shaken. That night she couldn't sleep, anxiety crawling under her skin like ants. Thomas found her at 2 a.m. sitting on the back porch in the freezing cold. He didn't say anything, just wrapped a blanket around her shoulders and sat down beside her. "I'm bringing trouble to your life," Maria said quietly. "Your family's upset. People are judging. My ex is threatening legal action. Maybe this was a mistake." Spring arrived with a rush of color and warmth. The desert transformed overnight, wildflowers blooming in impossible shades of orange, purple, and gold. Diego and Rosa spent every afternoon outside, coming home covered in dust and grinning. The workshop was busier than ever, with Thomas working 16-hour days to keep up with orders. Maria coordinated everything. Gallery shows, custom commissions, shipping logistics, marketing campaigns. She'd become essential to the business in ways that went far beyond her original role. When a major gallery in Scottsdale offered Thomas a solo exhibition, his first true spotlight show, Maria threw herself into preparations with fierce determination. The exhibition was scheduled for late April. It would feature 30 pieces, Thomas's largest collection ever. The gallery owner, a polished woman named Rebecca, visited the workshop to select pieces and discuss presentation. She walked through the space with reverent attention, photographing each item, taking notes. "This is museum-quality work," Rebecca said to Maria afterward. "Thomas is the real deal. With the right exposure, he could be nationally recognized. You've done an incredible job positioning him." "It's all him," Maria said. "I just help people see what's already there." "No, you do more than that. You understand the market. You know how to tell his story in a way that resonates." Artists need people like you. Thomas is lucky to have you. The words warmed Maria, but they also brought a strange anxiety. What if success changed things? What if Thomas became so in demand that their quiet life couldn't sustain itself? What if he outgrew needing her? The night before the exhibition, Maria couldn't sleep. She stood at the bedroom window, watching the workshop where Thomas was making final touches to a piece. He'd been working for hours, perfectionist to the end. Around midnight, she walked out to bring him food. The workshop was warm and fragrant with wood and oil. Thomas stood at his main workbench, carefully sanding a carved table leg. His concentration was absolute, his movements precise and careful. Maria watched from the doorway, struck by how beautiful he was like this. Not traditionally handsome, but strong and present and entirely himself. He looked up and saw her. His face softened into a smile. "You're supposed to be sleeping. So are you. Almost done. Just want this to be perfect." Maria walked closer, setting the food on a clear spot. "It's already perfect." "Everything you make is perfect." "That's not true. I see every flaw, every place where my hand slipped or the wood didn't cooperate." "Maybe, but nobody else sees those flaws. They just see the beauty." Thomas set down his sandpaper and wiped his hands. "You sound nervous." "About tomorrow. A little." "This is a big deal. What if people don't respond the way we hope? What if all this work doesn't pay off? Then we keep going. We keep making things and living our lives. Success doesn't change who we are. Doesn't it, though?" Maria heard the fear in her own voice. "When I met you, you were barely scraping by. Now you're about to be featured in one of the most prestigious galleries in Arizona. You're going to meet important people, wealthy collectors, other artists. What if you realize you don't need me anymore?" Thomas looked at her like she'd said something in a foreign language. "Maria, come here." She stepped closer. Thomas pulled her against him, his hands settling on her waist. "Listen to me. What we have has nothing to do with business or money or success. You think I need you because you're good at marketing. That's not why I need you. Then why? Because you make me laugh. Because Diego tells terrible jokes at breakfast and you groan but you're smiling. Because Rosa puts flowers on my workbench and you taught her to do that. Because when I wake up in the middle of the night from bad dreams, you're there. And that matters more than anything else. I need you because I love you." The words hung in the air between them. He'd never said it before, not directly. They danced around it, implied it, but never spoken it clearly. Maria's heart hammered in her chest. "You love me?" Completely, terrifyingly. "I love you, Maria, and not because you're useful or convenient. I love you because you're you. Because you're strong and stubborn and you don't let me hide from myself. Because you took a huge risk on me when you had nothing and you've built this life with me piece by piece. I love you because I can't imagine not loving you." Maria's eyes filled with tears. "I love you too. I've been so scared to say it, like speaking it out loud would make it too real, too vulnerable. But I love you. I love the way you are with my kids. I love how patient you are, how careful. I love watching you work. I love that you hate small talk, but you'll spend an hour listening to Rosa describe her imaginary friend. I love you." Thomas kissed her then, deep and slow and sure. It wasn't their first kiss, but it felt different. Loaded with promises and admissions. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. "Come to bed," Maria whispered. "The table can wait. Give me 5 minutes to clean up." She walked back to the house, her whole body humming with emotion. They'd crossed another line tonight and there was no going back. They'd admitted what this was. Not a convenient arrangement. Not temporary companionship. Love. Real, complicated, terrifying love. When Thomas joined her, they made love for the first time with the words spoken between them. It was tender and intense and nothing like Maria had imagined. There was vulnerability in it, trust that went deeper than physical. Afterward, lying tangled together, Maria felt like something inside her had finally settled into place. "I'm still scared," she admitted softly. "Me too. But I'm more scared of losing this than I am of trying." The exhibition opening was overwhelming. The gallery was packed with people in expensive clothes, sipping wine and discussing art with practiced sophistication. Thomas looked uncomfortable in his dark suit, but he handled the attention with more grace than Maria had expected. He talked about his grandfather's influence, about traditional techniques, about seeing stories in the wood grain. Maria stood back and watched him shine. He was good at this, despite his discomfort. People responded to his authenticity, his quiet passion. By the end of the night, 23 of the 30 pieces had red dots indicating sales. Rebecca was ecstatic, already planning the next exhibition. A man approached Maria near the end of the evening. He was older, maybe 60, with silver hair and an expensive watch. "You're Maria, right? The woman who handles Thomas's business?" "That's right. I'm Gregory Chen. I run a gallery in San Francisco. I'd like to talk about representing Thomas on the West Coast." "Are you his manager?" "Not officially. I just handle the administrative side." "You should make it official. You're clearly talented. Thomas is lucky to have someone who understands both the art and the market. Here's my card. Let's set up a meeting." As Gregory walked away, Maria felt a surge of pride. She'd done this. She'd helped make this happen. Thomas's talent was his own, but she'd created the platform for people to see it. That night in their hotel room, they celebrated with champagne and room service. Thomas couldn't stop smiling, his usual guardedness completely gone. "I can't believe this is real," he said, looking at the stack of business cards and contacts they'd collected. "6 months ago I was struggling to pay basic bills." "You deserve this." "You've always deserved this." Thomas pulled her close. "We deserve this. This is ours, Maria. Everything we've built together." They made love again, this time with champagne-loosened inhibitions and joy that felt almost dangerous in its intensity. Maria fell asleep wrapped around Thomas, perfectly content, perfectly happy. But happiness, she was learning, was fragile. The universe always found ways to test it. They drove home the next day, tired but elated. Diego and Rosa were waiting with Thomas's mother, who'd agreed to watch them for the weekend. Nina was warmer than she'd been during her first visit, actually smiling when they walked in. "The children were perfect," Nina said. "Diego helped me in the garden. Rosa painted a picture of my house." "Thank you for watching them," Maria said sincerely. "We really appreciate it." After Nina left, they settled back into their routine. But the success had shifted something. Over the next weeks, Thomas received more offers. More galleries wanted his work. A museum in New Mexico inquired about a commissioned piece. A documentary filmmaker wanted to profile him for a series on Native American artists. Maria coordinated everything, but the workload was becoming overwhelming. They needed to hire someone, maybe multiple people. The business was outgrowing their ability to manage it alone. They talked about it over dinner one night. "What if we brought in a proper business manager?" Maria suggested. "Someone with gallery experience. That would free me up to focus on other things." "And what other things?" Thomas asked. "I don't know. Maybe I could go back to teaching part-time. Or just be here for the kids more. Diego's getting older, starting to ask questions about his father. Rosa needs help with reading. I feel like I'm spread too thin." Thomas was quiet for a moment. "Do you regret this? Taking on my business?" "No, of course not. But I'm not sure where I fit anymore. When we started, you needed me for very specific things. Now you're successful enough to hire professionals. Real professionals who know what they're doing. I need you," Thomas said firmly. "Not as an employee. As my partner. In business and in life. But what does that actually mean? We live together, we sleep together, we love each other, but we're not married." The tension didn't break immediately. Instead, it festered like a wound neither of them knew how to treat. Thomas threw himself into work with renewed intensity, accepting every commission, staying in the workshop until past midnight. Maria managed the business with mechanical efficiency, but the joy had gone out of it. They were polite to each other, careful, but the warmth had drained away. Diego noticed first. "Why don't you and Thomas eat dinner together anymore?" he asked Maria one evening. "We're both just busy, sweetie. But you used to laugh all the time. Now you both just look sad." Out of the mouths of children came truths adults tried to hide. Maria hugged him close, not knowing what to say. How could she explain that sometimes love wasn't enough, that fear could poison even the best things? Thomas's mother called to invite them to a traditional gathering on the reservation. A celebration for spring, with food and music and community. Nina specifically asked that Maria and the children come. It felt like an olive branch, an invitation into the fold. Thomas accepted without consulting Maria. "We're going Saturday," he announced over breakfast, the first real conversation they'd had in days. "You could have asked me first," Maria said quietly. "I thought you wanted this. To be part of my community, I do. But I also want to be consulted about our plans." "Our plans," Thomas repeated, something bitter in his voice. I thought you weren't sure what R means anymore. The word stung because they were true. Maria had no response. They finished breakfast in silence. Saturday arrived warm and bright. They drove to the gathering spot in Thomas's truck, the kids chattering excitedly in the back seat, the adults silent in the front. The celebration was held in a large open area, with long tables of food and groups of people clustered everywhere. Music played from speakers, traditional songs mixed with modern ones. Nina greeted them warmly, hugging the children and nodding at Maria with something approaching approval. Come, eat. There's plenty. She led them to the food tables, introducing Maria to various relatives and community members. Some were friendly, others reserved, but most seemed willing to accept her presence. Thomas was pulled away almost immediately by a group of older men who wanted to discuss a commission for the tribal council building. Maria found herself standing alone with the kids, trying to look comfortable while feeling completely out of place. A woman around her age approached with a friendly smile. You're Maria, right? Thomas's girlfriend. Yes, Maria said, grateful for the friendliness. I'm not sure about the title, but that's me. I'm Claire. I grew up with Thomas's wife, Elena. We were best friends. The woman's smile didn't waver, but Maria felt ice slide down her spine. I heard you're living in their house now. That must be strange. It's Thomas's house, Maria said carefully. Is it, though? Elena picked out every piece of furniture, every color. She planned that kitchen renovation before she got sick. I used to visit her there all the time. The whole house was her dream home, and now you're just living in it like she never existed. Maria felt like she'd been slapped. I would never disrespect Elena's memory. Maybe not intentionally. But don't you think it's a little soon? 5 years might seem long to you, but for us, for people who knew them together, it feels like yesterday, and here you are, playing house with her husband in her home. Claire, that's enough, an older woman said, appearing at Maria's elbow. Leave her alone. Claire shrugged. Just speaking truth. People are talking, that's all. She walked away, leaving Maria shaking. The older woman, who introduced herself as Thomas's Aunt Margaret, patted Maria's arm. Don't mind her. Claire had feelings for Thomas before he married Elena. She's bitter, always has been. But the damage was done. Maria looked around at the gathering with new eyes. How many people here saw her as an intruder? How many thought she was trying to replace someone irreplaceable? She watched Thomas across the field, surrounded by his community, looking comfortable and at home. He belonged here, and she didn't. Across the gathering area, she spotted Nina talking with a younger woman. The woman was beautiful, with long dark hair and traditional jewelry. She laughed at something Nina said, touching the older woman's arm with easy familiarity. Then Nina gestured toward Thomas, and the young woman's face lit up with interest. Maria's stomach twisted. She watched as Nina led the woman over to Thomas, made introductions. The woman was clearly Apache, clearly integrated into the community. Thomas looked surprised but polite, nodding and talking. The woman laughed at something he said, leaning in close. That's Christine, Margaret said quietly. Nina's been trying to set them up for months. She's a teacher on the reservation, never been married. From a good family. Nina thinks she'd be perfect for Thomas. I see, Maria managed to say, but Thomas has been clear he's not interested. He's with you, is he though? Maria heard herself say. Or is he just settling because I was convenient? She didn't wait for Margaret's answer. She grabbed Diego and Rosa, making excuses about the kids being tired, and started walking toward the truck. Thomas intercepted her halfway across the field. Where are you going? We just got here. I think we should leave. The kids are tired. Mom, we're not tired, Rosa protested. We're having fun. We're leaving, Maria said more firmly. Thomas studied her face, saw something there that made his expression harden. Fine. Let me say goodbye to my mother. The drive home was arctic. Diego and Rosa sensed the tension and stayed quiet. When they got home, Maria sent the kids inside and turned to Thomas. Your mother introduced you to someone today, Christine. She seemed perfect for you, Apache, traditional, part of your community. Everything I'm not. Thomas closed his eyes. My mother has been trying to introduce me to Christine for a year. I've told her repeatedly I'm not interested. Maybe you should be. Maybe she's right. Maybe you need someone who actually fits into your life instead of someone who's just taking up space in a dead woman's house. What are you talking about? Someone at the gathering told me I'm living in Elena's dream home. That she picked everything, planned everything. And she's right, isn't she? I've been sleeping in another woman's house pretending it's mine, but it's not. It never will be. Thomas's face went pale. Who said that to you? It doesn't matter. What matters is that it's true. Everywhere I look in that house, there's Elena, her choices, her dreams, her life, and I'm just a placeholder. You are not a placeholder, Thomas said, his voice rising. You're the woman I love, the woman I want to build a future with. Why can't you believe that? Because you won't commit to me. You say you love me, but you won't marry me. You won't make it legal or official. You won't even call me your girlfriend in front of your mother. I'm just the woman who lives with you. The one who's good with paperwork and convenient to have around. I never said I wouldn't marry you. You threw it out there as an accusation and I didn't know how to respond. Marriage is complicated. It's legal and cultural and there are traditions involved. I needed time to think about how to do it right. Time. Maria laughed bitterly. You've had months. And meanwhile, I'm just supposed to wait and hope you eventually decide I'm worth the commitment. That's not fair. Nothing about this is fair. I came here with nothing. I've built my entire life around you and your business and your house, and I have no security. No guarantee that tomorrow you won't decide Christine is a better fit, that I don't belong here after all. Thomas stared at her. So what are you saying? You want to leave? The question hung in the air. Maria realized that's exactly what she was thinking. Pack up the kids, go back to Phoenix, start over somewhere else. Somewhere she didn't feel like a ghost living in someone else's life. Maybe I should, she said softly, before we all get hurt worse than we already are. We, Thomas said. You keep saying we're going to get hurt, but you're the only one running, Maria. You're the one who's looking for reasons this won't work instead of reasons it will. I'm protecting my children. You're protecting yourself. You're scared, so you're running, just like you probably ran from your marriage instead of fighting for it. It was a low blow and they both knew it. Maria felt tears burning her eyes. Don't you dare. You have no idea what I went through with my ex-husband. You're right, I don't. Because you won't talk about it. You won't let anyone in past a certain point. You think I'm the one holding back? Look at yourself. You've got one foot out the door at all times, just waiting for an excuse to leave. That's not true, isn't it? The second things get complicated. The second you feel uncomfortable, you want to run. You won't fight for this. You won't trust that I'm not going to abandon you like everyone else has. Maria wiped angrily at her tears. You're right. I don't trust it. I can't. I've been let down too many times. Then there's nothing I can do, Thomas said, and his voice was heavy with defeat. I can't fight both you and your fear. I can't prove something to you that you're determined not to believe. He turned and walked toward the workshop. Maria wanted to call him back, to take back everything she'd said, but pride and fear kept her silent. She watched him disappear into the barn, the door closing with finality. That night, Maria couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, their bed, staring at the ceiling and replaying every word. She'd been cruel. She'd accused him of things that weren't fair. But she'd also spoken truth. She was scared, terrified. Thomas called a family meeting 3 days later. Not just his immediate family, but aunts, uncles, cousins. He invited Maria's grandmother's old friends from town. He even tracked down Maria's mother, who she'd barely spoken to in years, and asked her to come. Maria was terrified, but Thomas was determined. If we're doing this, we do it right, he said. Out in the open. No more questions about where we stand. They gathered at Thomas's house on a Sunday afternoon. The living room was packed with people, filling every chair, sitting on the floor, leaning against walls. Nina sat in the place of honor, her expression carefully neutral. Maria's mother, Julia, sat near the back, looking uncomfortable but curious. Thomas stood in the center of the room with Maria beside him. Diego and Rosa sat on the couch, sensing this was important even if they didn't fully understand why. Thank you all for coming, Thomas began in English, then repeated in Apache for those who preferred it. I've asked you here because I need to make something clear. To my family, to Maria's family, to everyone. I need you all to understand what's happening in my life and where I stand. He took Maria's hand. 5 years ago, I lost my wife. Elena was everything to me. When she died, I thought my life was over. I stopped living. I just existed, going through motions, making things with my hands because it was the only way I knew to survive. I was lost. His voice grew stronger. Then this woman came into my life with nothing but 2 kids and determination. I offered her work and she gave me purpose. She took my failing business and transformed it. She filled my empty house with life and laughter. She showed me that moving forward doesn't mean forgetting the past. It means honoring it by choosing to live. Nina's expression shifted, softening slightly. Thomas continued, I know some of you have concerns. About tradition, about community, about what's appropriate. I respect those concerns. But I'm not a young man anymore. I'm not looking for my mother's approval or waiting for permission to live my life. I'm telling you how it is. He turned to Maria, his eyes locked on hers. Maria Martinez, you've become essential to my life in every way. Not just because you're good at business or helpful around the house. Because you make me want to be better. Because your children have given me a family I thought I'd never have. Because loving you has taught me that the heart is bigger than we think. That it can hold grief and joy at the same time. That honoring the past and building a future aren't contradictory. Maria's eyes filled with tears. This was nothing like she'd expected. So I'm asking you, in front of everyone who matters to both of us, to marry me, legally, officially, in whatever ceremony you want. Traditional Apache ways, Catholic ways, whatever makes you feel like this is real and permanent. I'm asking you to build this life with me knowing that I'm all in. No more half measures. No more uncertainty. The room was silent. Every eye was on Maria. She looked at Thomas, at his open, vulnerable face. Then she looked around the room. At Nina, who was wiping her eyes. At Julia, her mother, who was smiling through tears. At Diego and Rosa, who were holding hands, waiting. Yes, Maria said, her voice breaking. Yes, I'll marry you, the room erupted. People cheered, cried, offered congratulations. Nina stood and walked over, pulling Maria into a hug that surprised everyone. Welcome to the family, Nina said quietly. Officially, Julia approached next, crying openly. I'm sorry, she said to Maria. I'm sorry I wasn't there when you needed me, when you lost your job, when you were struggling. I was dealing with my own problems and I abandoned you. But I'm here now, if you'll let me be. Maria hugged her mother for the first time in 3 years. We have a lot to work through, but yes, I'd like that. The gathering turned into an impromptu celebration. Someone brought out food. Someone else started playing music. Diego and Rosa were passed around, hugged by relatives they barely knew who were already claiming them as family. Thomas stood with a group of older men who were teasing him good-naturedly about finally settling down again. Claire, the woman who'd been cruel at the previous gathering, approached Maria hesitantly. I owe you an apology. What I said was unfair. I was jealous and I took it out on you. Thomas is happy with you. Elena would have wanted that for him. Thank you, Maria said simply. That means a lot. As evening fell, people began leaving with promises to help with wedding preparations, to bring traditional items, to teach Maria about Apache ceremonies. When the last guests finally left, the house felt larger somehow, like it had expanded to hold all the love and acceptance that had filled it. Thomas and Maria stood on the back porch, watching stars appear in the darkening sky. Diego and Rosa were inside, exhausted and happy, getting ready for bed. That was terrifying, Maria admitted, but necessary. No more doubts, no more questions. Everyone knows where we stand now. Your mother hugged me. I didn't think that would ever happen. She saw how much I love you. That's all she needed to see. Thomas pulled Maria close, and she saw how much you love me. That you were willing to stay even when it was hard. That matters to her. They stood in comfortable silence for a while. Then Maria asked the question that had been nagging at her. What about Elena's things? The house you said she designed? I don't want to erase her, Thomas thought for a moment. We don't erase her, but we make the house ours. Maybe we redecorate some rooms, add things that reflect you and the kids. Keep some of what she chose because it's beautiful and honors her memory. The house can hold both our past and our future. I'd like that. And there's something else. Thomas turned to face her fully. I want to adopt Diego and Rosa, legally. I want to be their father in every sense. Not replacing their biological father, but being the father they deserve. The one who shows up, who stays, who loves them unconditionally. Maria's breath caught. Are you serious? Completely. If you're okay with it. And if they're okay with it, they'd be thrilled. They already think of you that way. They decided to ask the kids together the next morning. Over breakfast, Thomas cleared his throat nervously. Diego, Rosa, we have something to ask you. Both kids looked up from their cereal, curious. You know how your mom and I are getting married? Thomas began. Yeah, Rosa said excitedly. Mom's going to wear a pretty dress. Right. Well, when two people get married, they become a family. And I was wondering if you'd like to make it official, if you'd be okay with me adopting you, being your dad legally. Diego stared at him, something complex passing over his young face. What about our other dad? He'll always be your biological father. That doesn't change. But I'd like to be your dad too. The one who's here every day, who helps with homework and teaches you to carve and shows up to your school events. If you want that, will we have the same last name as you? Rosa asked. If you want to. That's up to you. Diego was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked, if you adopt us, does that mean you can't change your mind? You have to stay forever? The question revealed the fear he'd been carrying. Maria's heart broke a little. Thomas moved to kneel beside Diego's chair, looking him in the eye. I'm not going anywhere. Whether you want me to adopt you or not, I'm staying. But yes, adoption makes it legal and permanent. It means I'm choosing to be your father, and that choice is forever. Diego threw his arms around Thomas, hugging him fiercely. Then yes, I want you to be my dad. Rosa scrambled out of her chair and joined the hug. Me too, you're already my dad anyway. We're just making it official. Maria watched her children embrace the man who'd saved them all, and she felt a wholeness she'd never experienced before. They were becoming a real family. Complicated and blended and unconventional, but real. The next months were a whirlwind of planning. They decided on a blend of traditions, a small Catholic ceremony for Maria's family, followed by a traditional Apache blessing. Nina helped Maria prepare, teaching her about the significance of different symbols and practices. Julia came to visit and helped with wedding dress shopping, rebuilding their relationship one conversation at a time. The business continued to grow. They hired a business manager like Maria had suggested, which freed her up to focus on what she loved, being with her kids, supporting Thomas's art, and slowly pursuing teaching again. She started volunteering at the reservation school, which led to an offer to teach part-time. She accepted, grateful to return to work she found meaningful. Thomas worked on a special piece for their wedding ceremony, a carved bench that told their story through symbols and patterns. The journey from brokenness to wholeness, from loneliness to family. He worked on it in secret, surprising Maria with it a week before the wedding. When she saw it, she cried. Every element had meaning. Wood from trees on the property where they'd built their life. Carvings representing Diego's love of nature and Rosa's artistic spirit. Patterns that honored both Elena's memory and their new beginning. It was the most beautiful thing Maria had ever seen. It's for our home, Thomas explained. A place where our family sits together, where we rest and talk and just be. The wedding was small and perfect. Thomas wore traditional Apache clothing. Maria wore a simple white dress with a woven shawl Nina had made. Diego walked her down the aisle, proud and serious in his role. Rosa was flower girl, scattering petals with joyful abandon. When they exchanged vows, Thomas spoke in Apache first, then English. You needed work.